it's really sick that like people are this sick, and it even has to be a discussion whether or not our government weaponized ticks. I think that disturbs me kind of the most of all of this, is like the creepy side of like that shadow government what if question that we're asking the Pentagon now to answer. Why is there not more initiatives being taken to educate and figure it out, instead of it just being, everybody kept telling me it's a controversial disease. I'm like, what's controversial about me being sick? America as a whole, like, don't get me wrong, I love my country, but there are a lot of things that happened, specifically 1950 through 1975, that they didn't tell people about, and people are suffering today from it. They're thinking they have these other ailments, and they're getting put on Cymbalta and opioids and other medicines when they really have underlying infections. And the diet, the air, the water, everything around us is kind of designed to keep us sick. And that's the sad reality of it. When you have Lyme disease, it's not just Lyme disease. It's not just some infection that causes one thing. It is a complex of co-infections and side effects from herxing, which is what happens when you kill off the Lyme bacteria during treatment. So I have multiple co-infections and ailments that, regardless of what caused it, it's still there.
Welcome to the Tech Post Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Lapinski. In this episode, I interview Ashley Baker. She's a musician and an artist, and in this episode, we discuss her getting diagnosed with Lyme disease about a year ago. I also have Lyme disease myself, so in this episode, we dive into the topic about how she got diagnosed, some of the controversy surrounding it, the treatment methods, and some of the stuff that's been happening recently in Congress, asking the Pentagon for more information about it potentially being part of a biological weapons research program. This is an amazing episode, so please stay tuned. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Ashley Baker. Hey, Ashley, tell us a bit about who you are and what you're working on.
Hey guys, so my name's Ashley. I go by Ash the Artist. I'm a songwriter from Maryland, singer, songwriter, rapper, actress. I have Lyme disease, so I'm a Lyme disease advocate and warrior, you would say. It's been about like a year since my diagnosis. And I just love music and talking to people and connecting people.
Awesome. And we talked for quite a while before we ended up hitting record on this. So there's so many different topics we could get into, but you've got quite the story there. So, just for some context for the audience, I also have chronic Lyme disease myself, but I really want to talk about your experience and what you've been through. So can you talk a bit about, for the audience, just kind of explain, like, what have you been through? Like, what's this disease and this diagnosis and, battling this, what is this? What are we dealing with here?
Right. Okay. So Lyme disease has only been in my vocabulary for about a year and a half now. Basically a year and a half ago, I was a server full-time, also a trainer at Olive Garden. I was also a cosmetologist. I just graduated beauty school. I was working as an assistant manager and a color specialist at a shop that had just opened up in Hagerstown. Like, we were in the newspaper, we were so excited. And then I tore my knee one night while I was serving. And, I went to the doctor, got an MRI, and found out I have a condition where basically the cartilage in both of my legs, both of my knees, is kind of like deteriorating quicker than it should. So I started to do physical therapy for like 2-3 months, and about a month in, or a couple of weeks, I started to get very bizarre symptoms. I started to get very fatigued, bad inflammation. I developed eye floaters, so like when I looked around, I had like this eruption in my vision. My hearing started to suffer, as well as like confusion and like this feeling of psychosis, of brain fog. So basically, my doctor decided to check me because I used to be type 2 diabetic, for my glucose levels, and she, for some reason, decided to test me for Lyme disease, and it came back as like a false positive. What that basically means is, unfortunately, the CDC standard is like 5 bands to be CDC positive, and I didn't have enough to be considered positive. So she did treat me with doxycycline for a month. I got retested again a couple of months later, and my numbers went up. I was now CDC positive for Lyme disease, and we were all very confused as to how, when I was being treated with doxycycline, which is said to help Lyme disease. So from there, I bounced around to doctors, rheumatoid arthritis, bacteria infection, neurologists, all that good stuff. They tried to diagnose me with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, like you name it. They were trying to say I had all these things. I'm like, one doesn't just randomly develop these symptoms.
They did the
So,
same thing to me. All kinds of diagnoses, three-letter abbreviations for things, IBS, this, that, the ADHD, whatever. Like they just threw on the diagnoses and all that crap. I sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to touch on something you mentioned about the CDC, and I think it's really important for anyone listening to this. Is the CDC criteria is like criminally scientifically inaccurate. You actually don't need to necessarily test positive for 5 bands to get a proper diagnosis. There are certain antibody bands that are Lyme specific that if you test positive for those, you have Lyme disease, even if you don't have 5 antibody bands. There's certain ones that most tests don't test for, like 31 and 34, that you've got to go to a private lab to get those tested. And if you do, and you end up testing positive, then the only way you can get that antibody is if you have Lyme disease. So yeah, the CDC situation, I mean, did it change your outcome, or, did they say that did they delay your treatment or anything? Like what happened there?
I mean, they basically sent me to the bacteria infection specialist in my area in Hagerstown, Maryland. And this was supposed to be the top dog of the, company to help me out. And what they said was that I had an infection, I had antibodies, because of course they don't test for the actual bacteria, they test for antibodies, which is interesting. But basically they figured I had Lyme disease, that they didn't catch early enough. They don't know how long I've had it, but it's called chronic Lyme disease complex. And they told me that I was supposed to go to cognitive therapy. Like my treatment plan was to go pretty much see a psychiatrist and meditate and eat more broccoli.
Yeah. I had a doctor told me to just go live your life. I was like, well, I don't have a life because I'm sick. And it's a literal infection in your brain and it's causing inflammation. So yeah, I mean, you have to treat the underlying bacteria.
So after I got the false positive test, my doctor didn't really know what to do. This was my primary physician. She was super unfamiliar with Lyme, but at least she was smart enough to test me for it. So they put me on doxycycline, which is said to be, the first thing you're supposed to do with Lyme disease. And I was on like two or 3 months of doxycycline immediately. And this was before I even had the whole, full positive test results. She was doing this to be
at least they did that. Like, honestly, at least they did that. Because, I mean, we're calling it a false positive because that's what the doctors call it, but it was really a positive. You tested positive for Lyme disease. It just didn't meet CDC criteria.
Exactly. That's why I asked my doctor, I'm like, so would a normal, healthy human have any of these antibodies? And she didn't know the answer to it at the time, but she was like, well, maybe. And so she's like, maybe it's not Lyme disease. And and it wasn't even her fault. It was lack of education in the whole healthcare system as a whole.
Yeah.
So from there, they referred me to all these different doctors. And then I went to see a bacterial infection doctor, and he told me to do the cognitive therapy. He said to go see a therapist, see a psychiatrist, and that was going to be the help for my brain infection.
Yeah, and that's just so ridiculous because it's literally an infection in your brain, and it's eating away at your nervous system, and it's causing inflammation in your brain. Like they did the same thing to me. They're like, oh, it's in your head. Yeah, well, it was literally in my head, not mentally in my mind. Those are two different things. It was literally a spirochete in our brains, so it's just so ridiculous that the go-to in the medical system is, oh, here's antidepressants, here's here's mood stabilizers. Oh, you want an antipsychotic? Like that's the crap I had to deal with. Like, especially when we really didn't know what Lyme disease was and it wasn't being diagnosed properly. I mean, your story is so interesting because you just don't know when you got it. Because most people's story starts with, I got bit by a tick, and it's interesting because there's so many unknowns even about how you get this disease. were you born with it? Did you get it sexually transmitted? Was this from a transfusion? Was it a different bug? Like, is that a possibility? These are all questions that we haven't researched. We don't know the answers. Like, there's literally no answers to these questions.
But there should be, with this being a thing since the 70s, since
Yeah.
before the 70s, but since it being more publicly a thing since then, and we have made like no progress at all, that really raises the question of why. Why is there information being suppressed? Why is there not more initiatives being taken to educate and figure it out instead of it just being, everybody kept telling me it's a controversial disease. I'm like, what's controversial about me being sick? You
Yeah.
know?
And why is disease controversial? I mean, we can get into it. I mean, there's what's happening in the House right now. They passed an amendment. They're asking the Pentagon if the U.S. government weaponized ticks and insects for biological research, and it's based on a book by Chris Newby. She did the Under Our Skin documentary. I think she was a producer on it. And you, I think, had some interactions with one of her associates. And, I reviewed her book on this podcast. You can go listen to that episode if you want to go take a listen to that after this one. But what are your thoughts on all of this? And can you tell us a bit about the guy from Under Our Skin that you've been working with?
Yes. So first, I want to say the book Bitten. I definitely recommend anybody and everybody to read that book, not just if you deal with Lyme disease, but if you have any type of disease or if you just want to know about history in the country you live in, you should check it out. I actually, and just a fun fact, you can get it for free on Amazon audiobook. If you just sign up for the month trial, you can get it for free. That's what I did. I downloaded that and Lab 257, so that's been interesting. So anyways, I think that it's really sick that like people are this sick, and it even has to be a discussion whether or not our government weaponized ticks. I think that disturbs me kind of the most of all of this, is like the creepy side of like that shadow government what if question that we're asking the Pentagon now to answer. And Andy Andrews, he was mentioned in Bitten actually because him and Chris Newby did work together for Under Our Skin. Speaking with him, he actually lived in California for a long time. He was anti-Lyme disease. So I asked, why are you interested in Lyme disease? And he was like, his sister had gotten Lyme disease and he didn't believe her. He thought she was being a hypochondriac. And then one of his friends got it and got really sick. And then he started to do more research on it and found out there's more to this. So, I think that it's great to have people who don't have Lyme disease, such as Andy Andrews, shedding light on this subject. I think America as a whole, like, don't get me wrong, I love my country, but there are a lot of things that happened, specifically 1950 through 1975, that they didn't tell people about, and people are suffering today from it. They're thinking they have these other ailments, and they're getting put on Cymbalta and opioids and other medicines when they really have underlying infections, and the diet, the air, the water, everything around us is kind of designed to keep us sick. And that's the sad reality of it, in my opinion.
I mean, they're poisoning us. And then even the treatments for these conditions, I mean, they put me on antidepressants, and there have been studies to show that antidepressants can lead to bacterial resistance to antibiotics. So you're literally taking drugs that, that can potentially hurt you when you have these infections. So I know you've had to take some of these medications and manage some of these symptoms and stuff as well. And it's so crazy because, we don't have a medical system that knows how any of this stuff works. And there's so many variables and so many, like, I'm just reflecting back on some of the horrible experiences I've had with the medical system. I mean, it's to the point now where I literally just canceled my health insurance because I was like, I'm just going to pay doctors that know what they're doing for their knowledge and just pay them in cash for it, because that's the only way that I can guarantee that I'm going to get an honest answer, because having to dance around the insurance companies is a nightmare. Can you talk a bit about how you've been able to actually successfully get treatment with insurance? Because I find that kind of rare these days because I was denied treatment.
Yeah, no, totally. And I definitely am an empathetic person. So when I went, I'm going to tie this into what you just asked me, but when I went to the chronic Lyme disease rally in DC, where we actually talked to the people from the CDC and raised awareness about Lyme disease, it was just crazy because it's like, people just have no idea. When somebody, I feel like when anybody sees Lyme disease written down, like in a medical term, they kind of get a little anxious. I've had doctors kind of shy away from me or kind of just brush me off because people don't want to deal with Lyme disease because it is controversial. There are doctors who've lost their licenses for practicing outside of what, the American government is saying is good for the medical community for Lyme disease. When you have Lyme disease, it's not just Lyme disease. It's not just some infection that causes one thing. It is a complex of co-infections and side effects from herxing, which is what happens when you kill off the Lyme bacteria during treatment. So I have multiple co-infections and ailments that, regardless of what caused it, it's still there. So my doctor is trying to kind of focus on the neurological side effects and the inflammation and things we can see with MRIs and blood work versus like just saying what I have. Like we're trying to get hard proof and documentation on my case.
Yeah, and you've actually got a PICC line in your arm right there,
Yeah.
right now while you're talking to me because you're actually going through an extended round of antibiotic treatment right now. How's that going?
It's going well. For the first time since May 2018, I can say I have more hope. I don't think that I'll ever be the same ever. But Lyme disease takes you to a really dark place. Like it wasn't just I'm tired all the time. It was my body is like weak. Like I felt like my life energy was just leaving me. Like I've lost so much muscle mass and just
Yeah, I mean, it's a battle. I've gone through it too. It's a muscle wasting disease. It steals your energy. It breaks down your joints. It affects your nervous system and your brain, your memory, your recall. I edit these podcast episodes because I have to edit things out because I say my ums and ers and so's more than
yeah,
I used to. It
yeah.
sometimes it's hard to find the right words. So no worries here. Ultimately, this is an epidemic that's happening here now in the United States. This is real. What were you doing before all this? Like you've got a music career. Like you have a life that is more than just Lyme disease.
Yeah, so music has always been my thing since I was like a little girl. My mom forced me to do talent shows when I was a kid. So I've always had a musical background. I did some musicals, like I've done Rent, Fiddler on the Roof, Wizard of Oz, things like that throughout high school and college. And then recently we did Rent, the rock opera, which is a musical all about the AIDS epidemic in the late 80s, early 90s, which is ironic because like I auditioned for Rent back in April, and then I got diagnosed with Lyme disease in May. And then we practiced for a whole year because the whole theme of the show is, how do you measure a year? And some people are calling the AIDS epidemic AIDS Part 2, like B cell AIDS. And it was just weird for me going through that. But prior to all this, I didn't even know about Lyme disease. I thought you just get it from a tick. I was working. I had just graduated beauty school and was working full time as an assistant manager at a salon. I was a color specialist. I was a server and a trainer at Olive Garden. So I was doing a lot of physically demanding jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking coffee twice a day, consuming cheese, dairy, bread. I mean, I worked at Olive Garden, so like pasta, dessert, like it's all right there. And then my whole life just changed, like, after I tore my knee and then developed the bizarre symptoms and found out about Lyme, and then found out that it's controversial and that it's sad that I even have to fight to be sick. But I would say I'm physically not better off with Lyme, but like mentally, I'm better off with what I've been through from Lyme disease.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think my health will ever be the same, but I'm thankful for the lessons I've learned already, and I'm only a year in. And you bringing up, not to bring this back here, but you're speaking about insurance being a factor with treating Lyme. When I went to the rally in DC, there were so many people from different states, like Texas. We had people from Canada. We had people from all over the place. And just seeing different people from walks of life. One person's paying like $1,000 to $3,000 a month for treatment, and another person is getting lied to about treatment. They're getting treatment, but they're taking like pain medicine in Cymbalta.
Yeah.
It's sick that there's not just one place we could go to get the right answers, to get the truth. Because that's literally the only thing that's going to fix this is the truth and true healing. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we will see that. Like with
Well,
this.
and every doctor I've ever seen, they all have a little puzzle piece of knowledge. And you
Yeah,
kind of almost have to see as many doctors as possible and hope
yeah,
that you can gather puzzle pieces from all these different doctors, because they all have different opinions, different solutions, different practices, different herbs that they use, or different medications, or different protocols. And there is no guarantee with any of this. There's no, there's no one protocol fits all. There's no just take this drug and you're going to get better type solution. There's a lot of experimentation involved. There's a lot of figuring out like who and what is going to work for you. That's the other problem, is your condition, your set of co-infections might not be the same as mine. So you might be dealing with Lyme and Mycoplasma, and I might be dealing with Lyme and Babesia and Bartonella. Well, you're going to have a totally different symptom profile than I would, and we're going to have totally different treatments and protocols and things because we're dealing with different co-infections. Maybe you've got latent, Epstein-Barr virus.
yeah.
Maybe I don't. Maybe, there's another virus that we don't even know it. We haven't even found it, and we haven't even named it yet, that's causing us both to have symptoms. There's so many co-infections, and there's so many issues with polymicrobial infections. That is the major issue here. When I've talked to doctors, like, our medical system talks about one infection at a time, and that's how they're educated, is you treat one thing at a time and you only deal with one thing at a time. And the idea of multiple infections existing and coexisting and actually changing the symptom profile of each other is just so out of left field for like 90% of doctors.
It is. And I mean, when you read the book Bitten and Lab 257 and get into this information, it's mind blowing. It's literally mind blowing that they're splicing bacteria and viruses, and like depending on your DNA is going to affect you differently. And like, I don't know if I'm sure you do know about the Tuskegee experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And that correctly, and like they were testing with syphilis and with Lyme disease, spider keeping, a direct cousin of syphilis, and it just makes you think, because the U.S. I believe did admit to the Tuskegee experiments, and timeline-wise, that was right before 1950, 1975. It's just, I don't really believe in coincidences like that. And it's not, the government's going to do what they're going to do regardless. And it's like, me saying this, like, I just want them to do the right thing at this point and save some lives. But I feel like they're making too much money off of the false diagnoses and suppressing the truth. So I don't know if we will see the truth.
I hope we do. I mean, part of me is really, really hopeful that, we're finally at a point where it's been long enough that they're willing to say, we were doing this biological research. I don't know if it escaped the lab. I don't know if it was, sent out into the world on purpose. I don't know if, the Russian government stole it and then attacked America with it. We don't know those answers, because unfortunately that information is likely classified, and someone somewhere, or some documentation at the Pentagon and the CIA, they know what happened and they're not telling us. Right. I mean, if it was the Russians, I think as citizens, we have a right to know that we were attacked by another country. If it escaped the lab by accident, I think as citizens of this country, we have a right to know this escaped the lab by accident. If our government did this on purpose and released this with an intention, we have a right to know if they did this on purpose. Or if the purpose was something else and then it was an experiment that, went the wrong way, or I don't know. But at the very least, if we can get the reality of what this is figured out, and we establish that, hey, we're working from this point, this is a fact, and then we can move forward from there and figure out what the next solution is, then we can form plans, then we can strategize around this, then we can enact legislation to make the insurance companies provide accurate treatment. We can push the CDC to, figure out better testing methods. I mean, one of the things that boggles my mind is veterinary medicine is like 10 years ahead of where we're
Right.
at with people. They have more effective Lyme disease tests for dogs than
Right.
they have for people. And they have better treatment protocols, and they have more like laid out protocols for chronic versus non-chronic for animals. But yet for human beings, it's controversial. And we're using Western blot tests that are inaccurate. And then the criteria, even though you tested positive,
Yeah.
they tell you, oh, it's a false positive. And it's like, no, it's a positive,
Right.
and you shouldn't, that means you need to be treated. So it's it's so crazy because we unfortunately we live in this world now of fake news, of of altered search results that no
Yes.
longer no longer reflect the facts. I mean, part of the biggest issue with Lyme is the misinformation that is available when you search and you get involved in these Lyme communities. Like, I mean, on one hand, I'm really appreciative of the Lyme community because they're doing everything they can to try to help each other. At the same time, it's a bunch of people who are sick trying to figure out how to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And we're not the ones that should be solving this problem because we're sick. So unfortunately, when you're dealing with an infection that like impacts your brain and
Yeah.
your decision making, like it's really difficult to all of a sudden learn how to become your own doctor,
Yeah.
which unfortunately has happened to the Lyme community. So you get sucked into this kind of like rabbit hole of, oh, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried
Yeah.
this? And we're just all constantly trying to like meet up and compare notes and what worked for you, what didn't work for you.
Right.
And it's chaos. And then I've even talked to some people who did not have Lyme disease, who then were misdiagnosed with Lyme. And you get those people who are harmed as well, because
Yeah.
then they do a year of antibiotics and just get worse because they didn't have Lyme and were misdiagnosed. So you get both ends of the spectrum, where people who have diagnoses like fibromyalgia, like MS, that is actually Lyme disease, and they're not given the adequate treatment they need. Then you have other cases where someone's misdiagnosed with Lyme when they don't have it, and then they get treatment they don't need. And it's all just simply a lack of education and a breakdown of the medical system.
Right. And the
So
question is why? Why? When we are so advanced in all these other areas, why? And it makes you have to come back to the accusations and the information that you and I both know about what the government did do for Dietrich and Plum Island. It's not
yeah,
even just Lyme disease. They also did other experiments with, I mean, I'm not trying to take it super far-fetched here, but like MK Ultra, there was some things with like Frank Olson. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Like
yep.
there's something on Netflix called Wormwood, I believe. And that's like his Frank Olson's son. He gets into the story about like his father and like how they were giving the scientists psychedelics and some of them couldn't handle it. They were dropping viruses in like subways. Listen, there's crazy information out there, and like it's not far-fetched. Things don't make sense right now, and I just hope people open their eyes up and become their own advocates. Otherwise, if we just let the government continue to do this, like there's no hope for the future. Everybody is going to be completely sick, and then what's going to happen?
Well, the crazy thing is, like with MK Ultra, I mean, that is a declassified program, and you can go read their declassified reports of what they did, and people still don't believe it.
Yes.
It just boggles my mind when the source of the information is the government, and people go, oh, that can't be true. And it's like, so you'll believe the government and you'll believe the CDC that if you have less than 5 antibody bands, you don't have
Right.
Lyme disease. And you'll
Right.
believe them that chronic Lyme disease doesn't exist, but yet you won't believe them when they declassify something where they're saying, yeah, we did this.
It's crazy, and that falls into the problem as like a collective conscious that we were really failing. I feel we're so easily distracted, especially in America, not just here, but we're so easily distracted by Planet 50, District 51 memes and, Kardashians and what Kanye's doing. And it's like there are things happening right now that do affect you and your children, your children's children, but people are so consumed in this ego mentality, and it's really detrimental as a whole for like the world.
No, absolutely. And it's, I mean, on one hand, I'm hopeful that people like yourself who are coming out and speaking about this, I mean, me telling my own story, it took a really long time to come out with this. It's
Mm-hmm.
not easy, but
Yeah.
you know, it's really important that people like yourself have the courage to speak your truth and tell people what's going on. This is not just happening to us. This is happening to millions of people around the world. This is an
Right.
epidemic. This
Yeah.
is the infection that I've been reading about, superbugs, and how in the future there were going to be antibiotic resistant infections. And, you know, there was going to be, I mean, there's literally an entire movie industry of zombie movies about this. You know, like there's
Yeah.
an entire genre of films about this exact kind of subject and topic. And we're here in 2019 when we're recording this right now. Lyme disease is the superbug we've been warned about for decades. It's here, it's now, it's happening. I have it, you have it, people's children are getting it, our
Yeah.
dogs and our cats and our pets are getting it. I'm afraid it's in our food supply.
I agree, because think about if a rabbit or something goes and uses the bathroom in a garden, and then maybe that bacteria is there and grows on the cucumbers. Who's to say it's not there still?
Well, think about cows, cattle, you know, think
Yeah.
about the actual livestock. I mean, they dose our livestock in this country with antibiotics and hormones and all this crazy stuff. Well, you know, one of the theories in Lab 257 is, you know, that this was potentially created, you know, or at least released potentially from Plum Island, which was an FDA research facility.
Right.
And they were doing research because they were looking at using these diseases possibly as a way to eliminate an enemy's food supply.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, right. And it is the FDA that was doing it, technically.
correct. So it was in association with the military, and you know,
Right.
we don't know if Lyme disease came from Plum Island or not. Based on what was in Bitten, you know, we know that it potentially came from, what is it, the Rocky Mountain Lab in
Yes.
Montana.
I'm.
That's where Bordorfer was actually doing his initial research. Then he
Yeah.
was going to Washington, D.C., bringing samples with him to
Right.
the Pentagon and giving, and I think it was Fort Detrick, and giving them these diseases that they were breeding inside of these tick stomachs. So we know, like, I mean, the guy confessed. That's the thing that just like boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, I'm admitting this as a man, but whatever. I literally cried when I was reading Bitten, because when I got to the part where he confessed, it became real. That was it for me. It literally brought tears to my eyes. I don't get that emotional that often,
Yeah.
to the point where it brings me to tears. But that brought tears to my eyes when I got to the part where he confessed in the book. I believe him more than whatever is going to happen next with whatever the government says, whatever you know news report comes out, or whatever the Pentagon says. At the end of the day, I'm going to believe the guy who confessed on, like, right before he died, probably more so than whatever conclusion they end up coming to.
Yeah. Like how it's because he's been credible this whole time and helping you guys figure out what Lyme spirochete was and all that. So isn't he still just as credible?
Yep. And I mean, the thing that really got to me as well was the fact that there was Rickettsia helvetica, which just was left out as a causative agent, as a potential causative agent. And now we know Rickettsia helvetica, at the time, it didn't even have a name. It was called the Swiss agent.
Yes.
We now know that it's pretty much undetectable. It causes a range of neurological symptoms, and it very well could be that it is still a potential causative agent and is one of the co-infections that is infecting people and causing some of these symptoms. So it could be that the person who gets Lyme disease from, you know, one tick doesn't get Rickettsia helvetica, and a round of doxy cures them and they're good to go, and they don't get any other co-infections. That can happen. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
But what happens to the person who gets bit by a tick that's got Babesia, Lyme disease, and Rickettsia helvetica? What happens to that person? Doxy's not going to fix them. So, and they're not going to test positive on a test. So, they might test positive for the Lyme, but they might not test positive for the Babesia or the Rickettsia. So there's just so many different variables here. It's insane.
Yeah, and people don't even know about the other co-infections. Like, I had no information of it. Whenever they present Lyme disease to me, I'm thinking it's one bacteria. I would have had a bullseye rash. All the information we know about Lyme disease is just completely incorrect. And we need to completely re-educate people about Lyme disease, and
especially our doctors.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But we really need like the CDC and IDSA and all these other people to and corporations to be real. And that just seems so unrealistic because of the world we live in today. Listen, I completely agree with you. When I read Bitten, I was heartbroken. I still am. I mentioned earlier I have a really good poker face, but Lyme disease is the most terrible, amazing thing that ever happened to me. It's awful. I wouldn't wish it on my enemy because it's suffering. You are suffering. I do a lot of positive posts and music and things like that. And people always come to me and say, you're so uplifting and you're positive all the time. And it's all of this stems from deep pain and struggle and suffering. And for me to even have to fight to be sick, I don't want to have Lyme disease. I don't want to have to be an advocate for this or share all these things on my Facebook constantly, but I have to talk about it.
Yeah.
If I don't talk about it, and if you don't talk about it, who is going to represent for this whole group, these millions of people who are just dying silently? And it's really heartbreaking. It really is. And I really just hope that people wake up in America, because America, as I mentioned, people are very distracted. They're vibrating on a very low level, and it's time for people to wake up because we can't keep repeating our father's mistakes. It's time to fix stuff.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. It's completely changed the course of my life. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even yesterday, I had a minor flare up. Luckily I kind of know what these things are now and I'm able to manage them. But I mean, I was pretty much incapacitated last night. I had to drop everything I was doing. I basically just had to manage this minor flare-up I was having. My lymphatic system swelled up. It happens every full moon. I mean, It sounds so crazy to tell people this, but full moons cause my Lyme disease to flare up. And I've talked to dozens of other Lyme disease patients who also have Lyme disease, and they all experience the same thing. And we don't even know why it is. There's theories, there's hypotheses, but we don't know why every time there's a full moon, most of the people who have Lyme disease have a flare-up.
Yeah.
Is it frequency? Is there something gravitationally happening inside the human body? Is it reproducing on a lunar cycle? What is that? We don't even understand a almost universal symptom for everyone who has Lyme disease. We don't talk about it. There's no research done about it. It's just, yet all these people have this experience. The other one is EMF sensitivity.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I talked a little bit about this before we were recording, and I could tell you were probably hearing some things that you might not have heard before. And I'm going to explain it for the audience real quick here. Is basically Lyme eats away at the neural sheaths. It's called demyelination. And it's this fatty layer that's around the nerves. So if the Lyme disease spirochete comes in and eats that fatty layer, the nerve is then exposed. So it's exposed to all stimuli. It doesn't matter if it's EMF. It doesn't matter if it's a fluorescent light. It's just now hypersensitive, period, to all things. So, of course, someone with nerve damage is going to be sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies and energy. This is not woo-woo. This is not nonsense here. This is a real symptom that happens to people who have nerve damage. Right. And the amount of blowback and people that I've had to argue with about this topic is just insane. You bring up EMF sensitivity and people are like, that's not real. That can't possibly be. Like, you can't sense Wi-Fi and cell phone signals. And it's like, actually, I can. And it's because I have nerve damage. And it's a real condition caused by Lyme disease. And it's so difficult to explain to people that, we do not live in this black and white world. We live in this world of all these different possibilities and all these different variables. And you literally can't get the information because it's just not available. You can try to Google this stuff, but you're not going to get the truth on Google. Like,
Right.
if you got the truth on Google, they'd be out of a job, like, because their business is selling advertising and products. Like, that's what they do as a company. So you're trusting an advertiser organization for looking for the truth. Like, what? Like, that's not how they make their money. They don't make their money telling you the truth. So people unfortunately trust what they find when they Google for something.
Yes.
And you shouldn't, because it probably isn't true. So you can look at the studies and you can try and rely on the medical research, but I think something like 90 to 95% of studies can't be reproduced. Like, especially when it comes to like psychology and psychiatry and certain things, like a lot of this science is just made up. It's not real. But I can tell you that every time there's a full moon, I relapse in my symptoms. I can tell you, I've talked to many other Lyme disease patients who've experienced the same. I can tell you that when I'm in a room full of people who are all on their phones and all on LTE, like, it has an accumulative effect that can trigger some of my nerve symptoms and cause inflammation. It's not fake. It's real. This stuff is real. It makes logical sense. It makes scientific sense, but the amount of flack and pushback you get from some people is just, it's insane. Like, you literally have to fight just to explain to people that this exists, and we shouldn't have to do that. Like, it's nonsense, really.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
When we're already chronically fatigued.
Yeah, like literally, I'm so tired. I was going off of what you said. I think the denial aspect is really hurtful, especially even in the Lyme community. Like, I've had people who have had Lyme disease for like 20, 30, 40 years coming at me because I'm still trying to be positive and optimistic and uplifting. And they're like, you're naive. You have this for 10 years. Like, you're never going to get better. You're not, you know what I mean? And it's like, these people are tired. People are exhausted.
They're sick.
People want to give up.
Yeah.
And like, the leading death with Lyme disease is, honestly, from what I'm understanding, is suicide, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. There's a high suicide rate with people who have Lyme disease.
And I can see it. I can see why, like, if I wasn't mentally strong, I don't know where I would be right now, because this disease will test every single limit in you, physically, mentally, and even spiritually. And makes you, why me? And like, I didn't listen before this. I didn't take ibuprofen. I didn't drink soda. I rarely ever ate at McDonald's. Like, I always was like that health nut, stay woke person. So it's like, for this to happen to me, I don't believe in coincidence. I know I'm at the right place at the right time, and I pray for humanity as a whole, and I hope that people will become their own advocates, and instead of just clicking a link on Facebook, do your own research and cross-reference your sources and like, think for yourself, Or
what I do is I talk to people. I trust people. Like, I trust talking to another Lyme patient and comparing notes. Like, I trust that's been almost more valuable for me than even some of my doctors. Because I at the end of the day, I trust people. I don't trust the crap I find on the internet. I trust having a conversation like what you and I are having right now. That there's something to that we're forgetting because of Snapchat and likes and tweets and clicks and all this crap. And we're forgetting that, there's a human being behind that device.
Right.
And there's millions of us suffering from an epidemic of a superbug that's here that was possibly created by our own government. And that's reality. I mean, that's reality for me and you and millions of other people. So I'm hopeful, that people like you will continue to get the word out, that we can continue to raise awareness for this. I'm hopeful that science is going to provide some answers and we're going to be able to find some solutions.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely two things here where, you have to treat the actual bacterial infection first, and then you've got to figure out how to reverse the damage.
Yes.
But I mean, we're making advances in stem cells. We're making advances in, epigenetics and how to improve these things. So, there are going to be new innovations in the medical field that are going to help people like you and I. And we can't lose hope. We have to continue to push forward.
Yeah, so you have to keep your faith. And that doesn't have to be religious faith. Faith in yourself, faith in just hope as a whole. You have to keep it. Otherwise, you will be taken under. And, overall, right now where we're in a really weird spot. Like, we're waiting to hear what the government's going to say. Like you guys.
I already know. I've already read the evidence. The evidence to me is already clear. I don't care what the government says at this point.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you guys weaponized it. Whatever way you want to talk about it, y'all did some immoral work. You basically continued Nazis' work when you brought them over here under Project Paperclip. Everybody gets so offended about the Holocaust and all the things that happened, but like, dude, they were doing those experiments and similar things here. There was weird animals that washed up near Plum Island. I'm not even gonna take it there. Listen, but this live in. I'm telling you, even the celebrities who have Lyme disease, such as like Avril Lavigne, Shania Twain, Alec Baldwin, why don't we see them out here speaking? Like, if the Pentagon's getting questioned if they did this or not, why aren't celebrities and bigger people of status standing up for us?
There is a senator that has Lyme disease or had Lyme disease and was treated. I wonder what information they had access to that you and I don't.
And why aren't they speaking up about the corrupt part? Because they're above us. They have more on the line. They have sponsorships. They have the public eye on them, mainstream. So it's like, maybe they got threatened, and I'm not saying.
I was going to say they might have been told to, we'll give you the cure, but you can't tell anyone.
Right. Lied about it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts here before we wrap up?
I mean, just overall, for anybody out there watching, like, do your own research and get out here and talk to people, and don't take everything at face value, because nothing's really ever as it seems on this earth. Lyme disease is, I never had any idea. I could never fathom that Lyme disease was as serious as it is until it happened to me. And as cliche as it sounds, you just never know until you get it. And unfortunately, there's people walking around with misdiagnoses or ailments, and you actually have an infection in your brain and body. And the things, your lifestyle and diet and low vibrations are just feeding this parasite that's eating on you. And as drastic as it sounds, I believe in, I'm hopeful. I have faith. I'm hopeful that things will turn around for people. And as of right now, I'm going to forever talk about Lyme disease. I'll be an advocate until I can't speak about it anymore, because there's people out here who don't have a voice, who have died, who have committed suicide, or just don't have people like how you and I have each other now to speak. There's people out here alone suffering. So please do your research, and let's just pray that something happens and comes of this whole Department of Defense and Pentagon being questioned.
Yeah, I'm hopeful of that as well. And thank you for having the courage to come on the show, talk to me, and continuing your advocacy work and raising awareness, because, these are our lives. This is not, we're not promoting, something here. We're not trying to sell you anything. Like, our literal lives depend on figuring these things out, figuring out what the facts are, so that people like you and I can get treatment and get better and live our lives. For me, I want to eventually have kids and start a family. Like, I can't do that if I'm getting flare-ups every time there's a full moon. It's crazy. So again, thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you?
Thank you. So I am on, I just now recently got myself on all streaming platforms. So Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube, all that good stuff. You could look up Ash the Artist. It's all one word, capital A's, Ash the Artist. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page as well as an Instagram page. Both are called Ash the Artist. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for Lyme disease awareness, which is called Lyme Don't Kill My Vibe on Instagram and Lyme Life on Facebook. So I'll hopefully be able to send you some like links for this so people can maybe like click it or
Yeah,
something.
I'll put them in the description.
Perfect. Yeah. And just overall, like, I hope people can hear my story and have inspiration and know that we're not what we're going through. We are not what we were going through, and don't ever be ashamed of where you've been, because it's building your character and making you strong. And overall, do your research on Lyme disease. Wear bug spray and like educate yourself, please, because it sucks.
Protect yourself. That's a really important one. Is people really need to wear bug spray and long pants when they go out in the woods and that kind of thing. You can get bit anywhere on your body. And a lot of people do get bit on the chest, on their arms, on their necks. So yeah. And then there's a possibility that some of these infections can come from other bugs in other situations as well. So we don't know, because no one will fund the research. So can't tell you what the answer is, because no one will prove it. But again, thank you for coming on. It has been an absolute pleasure. I will put those links in the description so people can find them. And please continue to do the work that you're doing. And I hope you feel better.
Thank you. I hope you feel better too. And thank you for the light that you've shed on it for me as well.
Thanks for watching another uncensored episode of TechPost.io. I'm your host, Trent Lapinski, and don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that little notification bell next to the subscribe button so that you can get notified when we release new episodes. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, and other social networks, including Twitter and Facebook, at TechPost.io, and you can find me personally at Trent Lapinski. Once again, I'm Trent Lapinski, and this has been another great episode of TechPost.io. We'll see you soon.